This is Lab 15, Muscles of the Thigh. This is the list of muscles that you're responsible to know one origin and one insertion, as well as one action. Those muscles are the Gluteus Maximus, the Rectus Femoris, Adductor Magnus, Adductor Longus, Iliopsoas, and the Biceps Femoris. There's also two muscle groups, and we would like you to know what muscles make up those groups. The first is the quadriceps, and as the name suggests, this is 4 muscles, as well as the hamstrings, and this is a group that's made up of 3 muscles. For all muscles presented in this lab, you are responsible to identify the muscle using a model, provide one action, one synergist, and one antagonist for that muscle. The first muscle here is indicated by that black arrow. This is superficial muscles of the hip using a lateral view, and this is a big muscle of the hip, and it's a confidence builder for us. This is our Gluteus Maximus. I'm sure we've all heard of that. The origin, there are a bunch of origins here. Remember, you just need to know one, so pick one and stick with it for your studying. The first is the outer iliac blade, as well as the iliac crest, sacrum, and coccyx. The insertion is the gluteal tuberosity of the femur, as well as the iliotibial band of the fascia latae. The action is going to extend the thigh. It also laterally rotates the thigh, and it braces the knee. Now, a nice way to illustrate this muscle in action is to imagine yourself hiking down to the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon, and as you're hiking down the Bright Angel Trail, the South Kaibab Trail, every time you step, your gluteus maximus is working to brace the knee, to stabilize your knee for the next step. And that is why when you're finished hiking down to the river, oftentimes the next day or 48 hours after your hike, your gluteus maximus is extremely sore, because as you're going through this hike, you're really working this muscle. If we remove the gluteus maximus from the model, we expose deep muscles of the lateral view of the hip. And the muscle that we're interested in here is indicated by those arrows, and this is the gluteus medius. And this is a muscle that's going to abduct the thigh as well as medially rotate the thigh. Okay, now we're looking at superficial muscles of the lateral thigh. And the first muscle here is the tensor fascia latae. And the action of this muscle is to flex the thigh, abduct the thigh, and medially rotate the thigh. And we also have a structure here. This is not a muscle. However, this is a big tendon for a lot of these muscles, including the tensor fascia latae. Recall that the gluteus maximus inserts here as well. But the iliotibial band is often referred to as the IT band. And if you're a soccer player, football player, if you run track or cross country, I am sure that you know about the IT band and what it means to have a tight IT band. It can be extremely painful. The IT band inserts into the knee area, and if you have a tight IT band, this can cause knee pain. And a lot of times, the IT band gets tight in response to these other muscles either being overworked or weakened. There's some sort of imbalance there, and they get tight, and they end up pulling on the IT band, and this causes a lot of pain on the superficial lateral thigh. Now we're looking at muscles of the superficial anterior thigh. And the first 2 muscles we're going to look at are on the proximal portion of the thigh. And that is the psoas major, which is coming down from the spinal column, and the iliacus, which is coming off of the iliac crest there of the ilium. And for our purposes in this lab, we're going to combine those two muscles and we're going to know them as the iliopsoas collectively. And the origin for the iliopsoas is T12, L1 through L5, the sacrum, the iliac crest, and the iliac fossa. The insertion is the lesser trochanter of the femur, and the action is to flex the thigh as well as flex the lumbar vertebrae. The other muscle that we're going to talk about here is the sartorius, and the action for this muscle is to flex the thigh, laterally rotate the thigh, and flex the leg. And the sartorius is a unique muscle in the human body because it is the longest muscle that we have in the human body. And now we're looking at superficial muscles of the anterior thigh, but we're only looking at the quadriceps group. The quadriceps group is often referred to as the quads. If you go to a gym, you'll hear people saying, oh, it's a quad day. And quadriceps refers to a group of muscles that's made up of 4 individual muscles. And the first muscle is going to be on the lateral side, and it's the vastus lateralis. And that makes sense. Lateralis refers to the lateral thigh. So this is the quadricep muscle that's on the lateral thigh. Makes a lot of sense. The second muscle is the vastus medialis. Again, this muscle makes sense because it's on the medial side of the thigh. For these muscles, we want you to know that they both extend the leg. The muscle that's right on the superficial part of the thigh, anterior part of the thigh, is the rectus femoris. And the origin of this muscle is the anterior inferior iliac spine and the margin of the acetabulum. The insertion is the tibial tuberosity. And the action of this muscle is to also extend the leg, but it is going to flex the thigh as well. If we remove the rectus femoris, we expose a deep quadricep muscle, and this is called the vastus intermedius. And the action of this muscle is to extend the leg. And those are our 4 quadricep muscles: vastus lateralis, vastus medialis, rectus femoris, and vastus intermedius. Now I want you to take note of the spelling of intermedius. Notice the last 3 letters are just IUS. Compare that to medialis and lateralis, where the last 3 letters are LIS. Do not make the mistake on a quiz and misspell intermedius. Don't call it intermedialis. That will be incorrect. You'll lose points for spelling. Make sure that you're keeping track of your spelling, especially for this muscle, and it's intermedius. Now we're looking at muscles of the medial thigh, and the first muscle that we'll review is indicated by the yellow arrow, and this is the adductor brevis. Recall that brevis means that this muscle is going to be relatively shorter or smaller, and as the name suggests, this muscle is going to adduct the thigh. We have more adductors in the medial thigh. The first is the adductor longus, and we also have the adductor magnus. Now, for the adductor longus, the longus refers to the fact that this muscle is longer in the thigh, and for the adductor magnus, magnus refers to the size of this, and this is the biggest adductor in the medial thigh. Now there's a lot of overlap between the origins and the insertions of the adductor longus and the adductor magnus. And to help your studying, to make your studying a bit easier, we're going to highlight those features that do overlap for these 2 muscles. For the origin, the adductor longus and magnus share an origin at the pubis. Now, the adductor magnus also has an origin at the ischium, but because they share a origin at the pubis, it would be easier to remember that for your quiz. The insertion for the adductor longus and adductor magnus is the linea aspera. They share an insertion at this point. And then the adductor magnus has two other insertions, those being the gluteal tuberosity and the adductor tubercle of the femur. And that's for the adductor magnus only. And then for the action, they both adduct the thigh, as their name suggests. They also flex the thigh. They laterally rotate the thigh. And the adductor magnus also extends the thigh. Again, this is only for the adductor magnus. There's a few more muscles of the medial thigh that we're going to review, and this is the gracilis. Now the gracilis is this long, slender muscle here, right in the medial portion of the thigh, and this muscle is going to adduct the thigh and also flex the leg. Now we're looking at the posterior thigh, and this is going to be the other group of muscles that we have in this lab, and this is the hamstring group. The hamstring group is made up of 3 muscles. One is on the lateral side and 2 are on the medial side. On the lateral side of the posterior thigh, we have the biceps femoris. And as the name suggests, biceps, there are 2 organs. The first is the ischial tuberosity, and the second is the linea aspera. For a quiz, you just need to provide one, so choose one that you like and stick with it. And then for the insertion of the biceps femoris, there are 2 as well. First is the head of the fibula, and the second is the lateral condyle of the tibia. Same goes for the insertion, just pick one that you like and stick with it for the quiz. And then for the action of the biceps femoris, this muscle flexes the leg and it also extends the thigh. Now we're moving to the medial side of the posterior thigh. And the second muscle of the hamstring group is the semitendinosus. And this muscle is actually sitting superficially to the third muscle of the hamstring, and that's the semimembranosus. The action of these 2 muscles is to extend the thigh and flex the leg. Now, a helpful tip to remember the order of these muscles is that semitendinosus is sitting on top of the semimembranosus. So T in tendinosus refers to top. And also for semimembranosus, the M in membranosus can refer to the fact that these muscles are medial. So to reiterate, T for top for semitendinosus, and semimembranosus, M for medial. Now, just from this brief AV lecture, I would like to challenge you to identify real muscles from an image of a real human leg. And obviously this individual here has very pronounced muscles of the thigh, but it's important to remember that even if your legs do not look like this, you still have these muscles and you still use them every day when you're walking around. And so let's go over these muscles here. Let's first think about the quadriceps. And the first muscle that we have, if we think about quadriceps on the lateral side, what muscle is that going to be? That would be our vastus lateralis. This is the quadricep muscle on the lateral side. The muscle on the medial side is going to be our vastus medialis. Now, what is that third quadricep muscle that's right on the anterior portion of the femur? This is going to be our rectus femoris. And you can clearly see how these muscles are different from each other on this very pronounced leg. And the last muscle we'll do is shown on the individual's right leg, and that's the sartorius. Remember, this is the longest muscle in the human body, and we can clearly see this muscle running down as shown in this image. So again, remember that these are not just plastic pieces on a model. We use these muscles, we have these muscles, and again, even if your legs don't look like this, you still do have these muscles, and I would challenge you to try to identify these 4 muscles on your legs after watching this AV lecture.